So, what's the deal? You want to come around and hang for a bit? Yeah, I actually can't right now, bro. Sorry. Why not? Tool! Oh, shit! I'm fucking pumped! It's finally here. Hi review family, my name is Jay Morse, the review guy. I'm back again to bring you another video. In this one I'm covering the new Tool record, Fear Inoculum. Tool was formed in 1990, frontmanned by Maynard James Keenan. By far one of the most polarizing, one of the most critically acclaimed, one of the most important bands to pretty much ever exist. These strange interactions they've had with the industry, which has even resulted in quite a bit of censorship, their ability to incorporate visual arts. This is a band that has always put the progressive and progressive metal, the alt and alt metal, the avant and avant-garde metal. When it comes to rock and when it comes to metal, they've always been off the beaten path. They've always been willing to go far and beyond to make compositions, to make songs, to make albums that are just so boundary pushing but simultaneously accessible. That reflects in a lot of the sales they've gotten, considering that 2 of their albums out of 4 previous ones have debuted at #1 on the Billboard Top 200, which for the type of albums they are, kind of unheard of. At first, they really were a heavy metal band, an alternative metal band, and one of the most forefront leaders of the alt metal movement in the 90s when they came out with Undertow. But past that point, they really started incorporating Oriental music into their sounds, different instruments into their own sounds, weird time signatures into their own sounds, very interesting drumming. Not to mention what Danny Carey does with the rhythm section, whether we're talking about his usage of tabla-style techniques or octoband techniques, or his use of electronic drum triggers, as well as how he will do polyrhythms within his own sound. Tool also excels at their ability to turn on a dime in a track. They will go from like 0 to 100, they'll go from sluggish, they'll go to fast, they'll go to these weird time signatures to a steady grooving riff, all while Maynard James Keenan is coming through with his very interesting vocal style, filled with different inflections, filled with different notes and melodies and harmonizations. Very diverse vocalist, very unique vocalist. So it's been 14 years. 14 years since they've released a Tool record. 10,000 Days was their previous record. One of my personal favorite Tool records because I really enjoy their usage of sound effects on that record, of drum, Oriental type influence, percussion on that record, and just a lot of the compositions are just so long but intoxicating. They just pull you in. They do not feel as long as they are. Well, Maynard James Keenan has been releasing things past that point. He's part of quite a few of his own little projects on the side. Pucifer, you have his more probably popular one, A Perfect Circle, which actually dropped a record last year called Eat the Elephant, I believe it was called. I like that record quite a bit. I know it was a little bit of an unpopular opinion for me to like the record as much as I did, but I thought there was some nice song crafting on that record, but it was hardly a Tool record. That was more of just an alternative rock, just a rock and roll type record. But past the hyperbole, what is Fear Inoculum sounding like? Well, it's well over an hour's worth of material, 7 tracks long, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't want Tool to release another album. I was scared they weren't going to live up to the bar. They had been so rusty and not done anything for so long that I was afraid they were maybe going to lose touch a little bit and not sound as good. For this timeless band, I was hoping they were going to reach the bar that they had already set. And I know I wasn't alone on that. I know a lot of people were just like, is it going to live up to the hype? Is it going to sound good? And from the first time I heard the single, the self-titled single, the opener for the record, Fear Inoculum, I knew that this was going to be a good record. The first 2 tracks, Fear Inoculum as well as Pneuma, the latter of which reaches almost 12 minutes long, do not feel that long, and are pretty much Tool at their finest. They are a refined beast on this record. These first 2 tracks are a great indication if you want to check out some tracks for what you're going to feel going into the record. They switch up on a dime. There's so many progressions throughout. These are both basically just progressive rock and progressive metal tracks filled with dizzying riffs, dizzy, intoxicating riffs, drum lines that are very, very punchy, very interesting, some amazing amazing bass work, which has always been present throughout all of Tool's discography. The bass work has always been a prominent factor that not only makes the tracks funky, but adds this depth and dimension to it that doesn't just make the bass end up sounding like a grimier, lower-tuned guitar, which is an issue with a lot of songs in progressive metal and just metal in general. Maynard James Keenan's not necessarily sounding better than ever, but he's not necessarily sounding worse than ever either. He's kind of like Rob Halford. He just sounds completely and utterly timeless. His ability to pop out these abstract vocal melodies, these vocal inflections, these shivering, quaking vocals, these vulnerable type vocals, these lower vocals, these higher vocals, he doesn't necessarily ever need to layer them that much. A lot of times it's just his vocals. Sometimes he'll throw a little bit of echo on it, sometimes he'll throw a little bit of reverb on it, but for the most part, it's just his vocals by themselves, pretty unedited from an audio engineering point of view. And on the track Pneuma, as it reaches into the latter half, it shows why Tool has just been so easy to listen to for people that don't enjoy progressive rock or metal much, that don't like those long compositions that are very common in the genre, and that is these massive breakups in the instrumentation. Well, they'll change it up a little bit and go just into an instrumental without vocals. Now, I don't condone or endorse psychedelics. I'm straight edge, so if you've taken them and listened to Tool, you've probably open your mind's third eye of enlightenment, but personally, it makes me feel the tingles, so if you're taking psychedelics while listening to Tool, chances are you're getting the tingles in some various locations. I'm just so impressed with these first two tracks by how they sound like the old Tool that everyone's come to know and love, but just more well-refined, more well-crafted, not necessarily more well-produced. This just sounds like a timeless band that is sticking to their guns, but refining it a little bit, chiseling it a little bit, cutting around the edges a little bit, cutting some corners to make it a more full project, sculpting with that hammer and chisel, making it just so fine with the cobble that it just looks like this beautiful sculpture. And the way Invincible jumps into kind of this progressive metal arena rock sound around the 7-minute mark is just massive, the way those drums come through. Not to mention the chugging guitar riff that pops up near the latter half, with Maynard James Keenan going into his more gravelly, raspy delivery, which just makes him sound monstrous, so raw and aggressive. You also get the instrumental breaks throughout the track. This track almost reaches 13 minutes long. And one thing that Invincible tells me about Tool on Fear Inoculum, and pretty much Tool on every album, is how it's opened my eyes to the fact that they pack more into one long track than many bands do in an entire album. While other progressive metal bands and progressive metalcore bands are just packing in just the same ideas and recycling and regurgitating all of their previous discography and the same ideas and the same rhythms and the same guitar lines and the same tapping riffs and the same drum lines and the same vocal lines and the same guitar melodies on every single track for 48 minutes or whatever, Tool's making these well over an hour epics with these tracks that reach into the 10, 11, 12-minute marks that are packing so much interesting spice and flavor into them that makes them sound like no one else on the scene. You can't compare Tool to anyone. Usually I make some comparisons, but Tool is Tool. They've always been beloved for being abstract, for being avant-garde, for being off the beaten path, for being very artsy, kind of the pinch-nosed snobs, artsy hipster type band. But a lot of people love them, and with good reason, because they've taken progressive metal and they've taken art rock and alt metal and progressive metal and just made it their own playground to do whatever they like, with polyrhythms and different percussions and different vocal melodies. Now I'm going to take a second to stop talking about the longer tracks on the record, because for the most part I don't want to discredit them, but it's pretty much Tool by the numbers. Very interesting time signatures, very interesting compositions, very interesting playing, so much technicality, so much great performances. I want to talk more about the instrumental interludes across this album. Let's just say this is how you do interludes properly. Le Tonic contre le Pure, I apologize for the pronunciation of that, is 2 minutes and 14 seconds. It's the first interlude that you get on the record. It comes after the first two tracks, Fear Inoculum and Pneuma. This track is psychedelic as all hell. I mean, Tool has never been one to shy away from psychedelic sounds, from psychedelic instrumentation, but this is drifty. I'm really liking this interlude, especially after the first two tracks, which are so deep purple and hazy and intoxicating, dizzying. Whereas the other interludes on the record just sound like the weirdest avant-garde shit I've heard this year. I want to focus on Legion Inoculate and Chocolate Chip Trip, the first of which is extremely noisy. It sounds like a foreboding machine about to kill you, especially near the latter half. And I'm pretty sure that latter half would be it just malfunctioning. Guitar just wailing away with distortion that just gives it this edge, this visceral edge. Whereas Chocolate Chip Trip, probably my least favorite track on the record. It's electronic led, that has nothing to do with it. It's just the fact it's almost 5 minutes long, and it just feels very tedious. I do respect the sound play on this track quite a lot, but it just is so unfitting, in my opinion, to the rest of not only the interludes, but the rest of the track listing. I know that Tool has used electronics, has used things like they do, kind of like the chime they start off the track with, the kind of chime bell they start off with. It's just, it feels a little out of place in the track listing, and as I'm listening through, it is getting a little mundane. But with the final track, Mockingbeat, it's another just complete machine just having malfunction, whirring, and gigging. I like the bird sounds at the end. I'm assuming that's a mockingbird, considering it's called Mockingbeat, but this track, when it sounds like it's powering down, it's a very logical finisher to the record. And what sets this apart from some of the more noisier interludes on the record is the fact that it has this backing ambient instrumental, very lavish, very luscious. The track that comes before Mockingbeat, the ending track if you count full songs, is almost 16 minutes long, and it's called Tempest, and I'm a broken record. What can I say? It is Tool at their absolute finest. Justin Chancellor's bass work on this track is probably one of my favorite things on this track. It's one of my favorite things on this entire record, and pretty much any Tool record has amazing bass work. This is probably the most edited Maynard's voice gets on the entire record. It kind of has this strange robotic reverb type of effect on it, which maybe takes a little bit away from me, but in my opinion it does help the kind of artsy side of the prog metal. Otherwise, this is just packed with progressions, packed with interesting melodies and harmonies and riffs, breaks up quite a few times, restarts up in a completely different vein. If I could just say one thing that is my minor complaint for this record, and I know some people might get mad that I have any complaints, but I try to look at music critically, I try to reason with it, is the fact that I don't necessarily think this record took that many risks. Tool doesn't need to sound abstract. I'm not saying that they need to completely reroute their sound, that they need to wipe the slate clean and start with a blank canvas. Hardly. Tool at their absolute worst is better than most bands at their best, and this certainly isn't Tool at their worst. As is, it's a very strong record with strong performances, but as I'm listening through, it just sounds like after all this time, maybe this is the hype talking, but it does feel a lot like their previous material, and consistency isn't necessarily a bad thing. I was just maybe hoping to hear a little bit something different, and that is a little bit satiated by the fact they're always incorporating different polyrhythms, different rhythm sections, different vocal melodies, but otherwise strong-ass comeback. I hope this isn't the last we hear of Tool for the next 14 years, but I don't think this is their best record. I think it's one of their best records, but I personally think that I enjoy Anima better than this record. I think I slightly enjoy Lateralis better than this record, and I actually think 10,000 Days is even slightly better than this. But that's hard to say because pretty much Tool's entire discography, including Fear Inoculum, is pitch perfect, so it's hard to really, it's like picking a favorite child. But yeah, welcome back, Tool. Tool's not like anyone else on the block. They're so unique, they're so full of flair. I don't think I need to go any further by saying I recommend this record. They're just like no one else. Check this record out, please. I'm going to be giving this album a 9 out of 10, and that is a wrap. Please stay for the on-screen links and videos that you might be interested in. Have you heard this new Tool album, Fear Inoculum? If you have, let me know in the comment section below what you thought of it. I would love to discuss the record with you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to join the review family today. We'd love to have you. Like this video. If you enjoyed the video, it'll help me out a lot. And hit that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. My name is Jay Morris, the Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.